how's it going? So we're out at my parents' house to give you a tour of their garden, and we've done a couple other tour videos before, but I don't think ever this early in the season. It's the last day of April. It's starting to rain right now. In fact, we got a storm warning saying that there was heavy thunderstorms, rain, hail, and 50-mile-an-hour winds heading our direction. So hopefully we'll get the tour done in time. My parents are at work today, so we thought we'd sneak out. It is beautiful right now. I love gray rainy days because we hardly ever get those here in Eastern Oregon. But this is, for those of you who didn't see either one of those tours, this is the house that I grew up in primarily. We moved here when I was 6 years old, and I learned a lot in this space. The garden looked nothing like this when we moved in. It was waist-high weeds. There are only a handful of things like trees that were here when we moved in that are still here. Everything else has been built. So this is where I did a lot of my learning, a lot of work. It wasn't necessarily fun work when I was a little kid, but now I'm thankful for it. So this is the entrance to their property, and it's very different from ours. So I do need to explain, their garden is on a hill. So it's terraced, there's rock walls, like little garden rooms all over the place, while our garden is completely flat. So anyway, they have totally different feels. Also, theirs is 30+ years old, and ours, we have been tearing a lot of things out, and so we're starting new areas. So it's just kind of fun to see two different gardens in two very different stages of their life. Anyway, right here in this flower bed, they've tried out several different things and have just landed on boxwoods because this is kind of an interesting area. It's kind of sun and shade, but it varies based on what shrub happens to be hanging over the fence at any given time. So boxwoods can handle both sun and shade, so they're a great option. Plus they give that little bit of a formal feel. And then there's the 4 season statues along here: winter, fall, spring, and summer. My mom has always really loved the 4 seasons statues. And then this is a beautiful view. So you can see this right here is our first level and goes down a couple of stairs, but right here, this is called a Twombly's Red Sentinel, Japanese maple. I had one of these in our old garden, and I just feel like it's the most beautiful glowing color, and it's the most beautiful right when the sun is going down. And you can see, because the sun comes through here when it's going down, and if you're down in the yard there, it just glows through the red foliage. And then this here used to be my mom's moon garden, so she attempted to do that in this space, and she planted a hedge of white peonies right here, and they all came up pink. So at the time she was like, well, that's what I put in. We don't really have, I mean, they've done so much work to this house, and the interior of the house needed a ton of work as well, that she was like, I don't really have the budget to allocate to changing them, so we'll just do something else in this space. And it has evolved from there. So there are bobo hydrangeas that Erin and I came out here and planted a couple years ago, and they're just coming back now. A hedge of delphiniums. There's some beautiful iris in here, variegated iris that blooms purple. And then this is a slender silhouette sweet gum tree. They get like 70-ish feet tall, and they only stay, I think they grow like 5 or 6 feet wide, like an incredibly thin, tall tree. And they get these beautiful big leaves. Like these, as they mature, the leaves get nice and big. So I think they've got a couple of these trees in their garden. The rain is picking up. How are you doing, Erin, with the camera? Good? Okay. But I also love, like, they've got a lilac that looks an awful lot like ours do now after I trimmed them up, kind of trimmed up as a tree. This was here when we moved in. So that's kind of a fun thing there. It has dark purple blooms on this one. And then right on the other side of this concrete step, which was here when we moved in, there was a fence, and all of this behind me was pasture. So the fence went right up to the parking area, and it was just like all of this was weeds, all of it. I just wish that I had more pictures and things of what it looked like, because it's an incredible transformation. But there's some beautiful plants in here. Sweet woodruff. Their ground cover game is strong in this garden, and that's something that I'm missing in ours that I'd like to kind of fix a little bit. Tricolor beech right here, that's just leafing out, and these have the beautiful pink tinged leaves, and it'll get even more glorious as it wakes up even further. And this one is old, like really old. In our area, like the tag says that they get 25 feet tall by about that wide. In our area, maybe not, with how harsh it is. We kind of treat them as an accent tree. That's why it's in such close quarters, because they grow about, I think this is its new growth. They grow about this much every year. They're really, really slow. Let's go up this way. So when you come in the main entrance, you can take a right and you can go up to the entrance to their house. You can see that my mom is just gathering things for containers. I asked her, can we come tour your garden? She said, well, I don't have any of my pots planted. And I told her not to worry about it because none of mine are planted either, and probably a lot of yours aren't either. At this stage of the game, we're just starting to gather things. In fact, I'm still waiting on a lot of things that really can't handle our temps yet until it gets a little bit warmer, but we should look at some of this stuff. So there's red spikes. These are the Acapulco orange impatiens. These will be beautiful. And then Sweet Caroline Red Hawk Ipomea. This is CS right here. That stands for cinnamon spot. She has a cinnamon colored spot on her head. Super Bells, over easy. So they've got the big white flower with the yellow throat. These are a begonia called apricot. Illumination apricot. Isn't this right here? Like if I had to choose a color to assign to my mom, this would be it right here. This right here, that kind of peachy pink. And then a beautiful coleus that kind of mimics or draws that kind of pink tone out of this. Oh, so pretty. Right here, we planted these tulips last year for them. These are the brownie tulips, and then there are some labella pox left over from a previous year. But it's kind of a really interesting look having them mixed in together. And those brownies are just intensely colored. Guacamole hostas, there's a hedge of them that come up right in here. These have not been trimmed yet. These are called Mount Bruno Boxwoods, and these are their mature size. They stay very small and round, but my mom does come in usually and trims them up into a little bit of a tighter form. But we just, like I haven't trimmed any of mine either. I think I'm going to take after them this weekend because we've got the perfect forecast for it. We're past the point of freezing and we're not super, super hot yet. And the rain is starting to come down pretty heavy. So I think we're going to hop inside for a few minutes and hopefully we'll be able to come back out. Okay, so we're just going to pick up where we left off. It didn't last for very long, maybe like 30, 40 minutes or so, and I got a lot cooler out here. But this right here is a ghost Japanese maple, and this one I remember planting in the dark. My dad, Aaron, my mom and I were out here. I think my dad had a headlamp on, and they were getting ready for some kind of tour, and this was years ago, and we thought we just got to get this tree in the ground. So we came out here and did it, and it's difficult to plant here because the ivy that you see right behind the tulips, that's actually the top of a rock wall. So the rock wall is just right there, right where we were planting, and we were just all worried that we were going to collapse it. It was so dark we couldn't really see what we were doing. But as we move further down this way, there are some oak leaf hydrangeas that are just starting to break dormancy and starting to leaf out. This right here, when we moved in, there was no rock fascia, and there was ivy that had crawled up the entire side of this house. I mean, on the chimney, on the side of the house and everything. And it was a really good way for mice to get in the house because they would climb up and find ways in. And eventually the whole thing had to be taken down and it had ruined the side of the house. So this is much better than it was. And if you come up here, little Japanese maple tucked in right down in there. We've got the balcony here, which there's a what is that sound? Is that a pump? Oh, and the fountain down there. Yeah, we need to fill the fountain when we go down there. I can hear that sound. But it's really beautiful when you look from up here. You might remember the video when Aaron and I came and I set up all of their not all of them, but most of their containers up on a drip system. And it's still here. Like it's still our original, how we had it set up, and everything has worked really well. And then these are some of the containers that they still have yet to plant. But isn't it beautiful? The blue spruce, the Persian parotia, there's a weeping birch down there, which we'll look at all these when we head down there. But the royalty crabapple, which is straight in front of us here, that was another original tree that was here when they moved in. When we moved in, I should say. Okay, let's head down. This is a beautiful view as well. When you look down in and you can see the boxwood hedging, and you have a better view of the plants inside when you're up at this level. And this right here is kind of the front yard, I guess you could call it, just because it's right up here by the front door. The house is situated kind of oddly, I guess. When we moved in, this was a mud room, and so there was a tiny little door, and there was one little staircase. I'm trying to remember what it was like around it. I think it was just dirt, but it had started to separate from the house and sink. So we lived with that for a lot of years. I remember raising kittens in the mudroom because it wasn't attached. Like it was a definite mudroom where you could like shed all of your boots and your coats and all of that kind of thing, which was a kind of nice area to have. But they eventually had it rebuilt on as kind of more of a formal entryway. But you might remember this. view from our clean out video this spring. We came out here and we just helped them clean out flower beds, and it was fun. It's fun to get away from your own space for a little bit. And I've put in, you know, a lot of hours working in this garden in the past, and it's fun to come back and work in it again. With boxwood hedging on the left here, we came and planted these labella pock tulips and the autumn frost hostas. And that's been a couple years ago, and you can see the white tree peony is just about ready to burst. Beautiful big buds. Oh, I'm excited to get one of these. I bought one of these this spring and I have it in our greenhouse ready to plant out in the moon garden. Cranberry bush viburnum right in here, delphiniums, lady's mantle, which is probably the most beautiful plant with water droplets ever, because they have these kind of cupped leaves where the water just collects in there. It's so pretty. They just added this larch in this spring. There was some sort of evergreen. I think it was a blue evergreen, and it was struggling. It's a little shady in this spot, so I think the larch is going to do really well. We've got some really pretty elderberry in here, variegated elderberry, which is surprising it's doing so well when it's so shrouded. This right here is a dawn viburnum, which blooms, pink blooms very early, and it's very fragrant. There's a weeping blue spruce. Boy, I probably shouldn't go plant by plant, should I? It'll take all day. In this area here, there's some eupatorium, chocolate vine, and those are beautiful. They grow up about this tall. They have beautiful chocolate colored stems and then kind of that bicolor purple green leaf. And then this whole area is full of Tuscan sun roses. There's some David phlox that's beautiful, hardy geraniums, yarrow back in there. There's some dogwood. This whole patch is the David phlox right here. That's been there since I was little. It's always been a favorite. We don't deal with powdery mildew and some other problems that the older varieties of phlox typically suffer from, because we are typically very dry here. This is a very odd day, but it's so pretty out here when it rains. This is kind of the perfect day to be out here. Lamb's ear here, and then there's some Japanese anemones, which are, and it's been a battle to keep them in check. They're the type that wants to just go everywhere. They're beautiful in the fall. I'm just looking right in front of me. Erin, you should spin around and just look at the Japanese maple from this angle. Look at how beautiful that is. See, this garden right here, there's so many beautiful layers because there's so many mature trees. And it's so fun to come out here and show some of the things that maybe we've even planted, but they're so little and they're babies, and it's hard to imagine what they will look like once they actually get to their full size. Like, for example, right here, there's a Corinthian linden. We just bought 5 Corinthian lindens this spring. Haven't even put them in the ground yet, but I can see this, and this is where I get a lot of my inspiration, both in this garden, any mature garden that we visit. It's so fun to see the specimens at a bigger size because it helps you imagine what they would look like in your own space. This is actually a golden smoke bush that is glorious. They have to cut it way back every year because it grows so big. And then the whole rest of the area is full of Centaria or mountain bluet. It's also kind of a thug. It gets really neat buds and then kind of disc-shaped blue blooms, but it wants to spread itself around for sure. These are flower carpet roses in a coral color. Probably should have filled up the fountain before we started the tour. I have a hose going in the fountain down below, but that's usually on and creating a really nice noise. But you might be able to hear the weir in the back. There is a ditch that they had piped, but the weir is still open and you can still hear the sound of water, which is really nice. And then right through this arbor is the vegetable garden. It's kind of a sunken garden and it's really beautiful in here. Very charming. These raised beds they put in years and years and years ago. And they've just started planting some things. There's some beets up that I'm seeing. There's some zinnias, pepper plants in these caps, it looks like, radishes. We've got marigolds in here, tomatoes that are wanting to bust out of their caps, potatoes. Let's see, I think there's more potatoes in this bed. Green onions, shallots, garlic. This is a cantaloupe right there. And the straw is really nice. So they do the straw top dress once a year and it stays fluffy for just not very long because, you know, you get a rain like this and it starts breaking it down a little bit. And it does help suppress weeds except for the wheat itself, which will come up a little bit, but it's fairly easy to control it's easy to pull out. And then back in here are the raspberry beds. These are all, I think, heritage raspberries. These were here. So there were 4 rows of raspberries, which is kind of hard to imagine that now. The space has been like this for a long time. But there was another row in here, and then a 4th row right beyond that. And you know how big raspberries get. They were so huge, we could hardly walk between the rows, and they're so thorny that they decided to take 2 rows out to give us some more space, which has been so, so nice. So there are some fall gold raspberries on that end, on the 2nd row there, which are my favorite. And then I just came out and planted some strawberries for them not long ago because we did a trade. I told them that I would plant strawberries if they would let me have an old stack of T-posts that had been here probably since I was a little girl and hadn't been used. So we did a little swap there. Potting shed. So my mom had this built by a guy that we know out of all recycled materials. And it's just a really fun place in here, if we can get the door open. So there's just all kinds of supplies in here. She's probably gonna be like, oh my gosh, you showed the inside of the potting shed. But I love this. I love the shelf full of pots. Like any gardener that I know would love this site. It's just like brimming with possibilities. You know, all their stakes. There's some extra pots and containers and things in here. There's our croquet set that we use all the time. And they actually went and they bought a tiller. We let them borrow ours after we got it, and they liked it a lot, so they went and got their own. Okay, CS, we gotta go out of here. Don't want to lock you in on accident. Okay, right down here there's a big drift of comfrey, and it's in its glory right now. Isn't that beautiful? This is a birch. Beech, not a birch. Beech tree. Can't remember, a black swan maybe? Really deep purple leaves. It's beautiful. So right in here, this is all sweet woodruff, and then calendulas. There's some traditional varieties of calendulas in here that seed themselves every year. So this will fill up with calendulas and be full of like apricot, orange, and yellow colored flowers later on in the season. But this is kind of a fun, unexpected area back here. So just a couple more raised beds because we like to utilize as much space as we can, kind of like how we have the raised beds behind our greenhouse. It's fun just to tuck in areas like this because it seems a little bit magical to me to come back to this spot that could just be like tomato frames and junk and tools, you know, and bags of stuff. It'd be really easy to use space like this, but if you're very intentional with it, you can get more food production or more flower production out of it, and it makes it beautiful, which feeds me, and it also feeds my parents. Really like that kind of thing as well. So this was made out of an old door right here. It's really heavy, but it's on a pulley system right over here, which I should probably not mess with. I don't want it to come crashing down. But my parents grow greens in here in the wintertime. It stays fairly warm. This is the south side of the potting shed. And then this bed here has been built up. Although I need to talk to them about their soil level in here. Look at this. It's quite low, but it is a lot higher than traditional raised beds, so it's still easy to garden in. You might recognize these. So I feel like my parents' garden is like, I love their style of gardening, and their garden is just like 20 years ahead of mine. A little snapshot, except for theirs has a very cozy feel. I just love the terraced nature, and I like the way that it creates very specific rooms and pockets and makes it feel really homey. Let's head down this direction. This is the fountain that used to belong in the front yard, and I think the bowl's cracked or something. But anyway, they've got some flower carpet roses in there, and then they pop some supertunias and other things in there through the season. It's a really fun way to use it. And some grapevines right here, and a wall of honeysuckle. Oh, look at that mountain blue is blooming. Here we go. I wonder why this one's so much more ahead than the other ones. Look at those blooms. First of all, I think those are really interesting. Like, those look so artistic. And then the blooms are they're beautiful. And there's white varieties of those too. This area has changed a little bit in the past few years because if you take a look right there, you can see the stump of a crabapple that they lost last year. So that crabapple created a huge canopy, and you know how sad it is to lose those sorts of things. It has opened this area up to a lot more sun, which will be nice in a way because there are roses. This was formerly a cutting garden, and I think that's what they still call it. But I think they'll be able to do more cut type flowers in this area now that it's got more sun. It just kind of evolved into almost more of a shady spot, except for right in the middle because of that crab apple. So you just have to kind of learn to roll with things in the garden. Look at these. I think those are lollipop crabs right there. They grow 10 by 10, so they're about at max. They get beautiful red berries, which are persistent, which means they hang on. So they don't usually make a mess. Usually like the birds come and clean them up. They don't fall all over the ground. And then we've got a contorted filbert that is supposed to be red, and it looks like we're getting a little bit, it's reverting a tiny bit, but it's really interesting bark, nice and dark, and then the leaves are beautiful as well. A bunch of bleeding hearts. Look at this. Doesn't that look magical? Let me walk through here so you can see. Like, I just love it. I just planted my first bleeding hearts in our garden this spring. I planted some white ones. Alba is the variety name. I think these are the same right here. I planted 5 of them. They're kind of near our back sun porch area. Right in here, there's echinacea and a hedge of Bergarten sage, and it looks like it snowed in here because of the crabapple blooms that are starting to fall. And the green mountain boxwoods, aren't these enormous? Like, you read on the tag that they'll get 5 to 6 feet tall and wide or something like that, and it's hard to imagine boxwoods that big because typically they're kept shorn in such tight shapes and such like smaller. These have, obviously been topped. They would be more cone shaped, but they're huge. I mean, I'm 5'4", so I mean, this gives you a very good snapshot of how big they'll get, which was kind of not considered when they planted them so near the opening here down to this next garden. Oh, I need to turn the hose off. Hold on. Hold that thought. Flooding their garden. The fountain was sucking air, so I ran down here to fix it real quick. I gave those roses a deep watering there. Okay, so let's just head back down this way. This is the other thing that's changed in this garden. Right here where the angel statue is, you can kind of even see some of it growing back. And then the same right here, there were some willow leaf pears, which are so beautiful. And they were here forever, for years and years. And I think it was the spring or the fall that we had a really bad cold snap. It killed a lot of mature trees, and those were seriously wounded in that winter. And then they just kind of limped by, and finally they had to take them out. And that was just a couple of years ago, but it really didn't take long to get used to this area without them, because there is another linden tree right here that's gotten huge, really big, beautiful down here. Brunnera right below it. Isn't that gorgeous? Brunnera is just in its prime right now. And you can see right behind it the lemony lace elderberries. And this area is very hard to plant in. I remember before a tour a few years back, I helped plant like some little 4-inch annuals, and it was so hard. Like, I do not know how they did it, because I see surface roots just coming up all over in this area, but these plants are just loving it. They're doing great. This is a hydrangea standard right here, underplanted with some Haconocloa aureola. And it's just this beautiful Japanese forest grass. It gets thick and lush, and it just is so graceful looking and soft. I really, really like that. This is a hedge of choke cherries. Choke cherries, right? Yeah. It's called Pawnee Buttes Western Sand Cherry, not choke cherry. So Pawnee Buttes Western Sand Cherry that are just now going out of bloom. There's a gold 9-bark right here. This is another Twombly's Red Sentinel Japanese maple. So you can kind of see it in its younger form versus the older form up top. We're gonna get the sun now. Another hydrangea standard right here, a place to sit and watch the fountain, which is beautiful. They originally tried to plant some things around the base, but this fountain just splattered so dang bad that they ended up just digging out the whole area and having gravel installed so that there was no water issues and no mud or anything like that. And I think it's kind of nice to have it be clear right here. Sometimes you just need that breathing space in a garden. Down here was where we used to have our gardens as kids. So my garden was the one on the bottom right there, and my brother's garden was right here. And right here was a dog kennel. That's changed quite a bit. We had black labs mostly growing up, and so we had the dog kennel here, and then Joe, my brother, usually grew vine crops. He still grows really good pumpkins. He grows them every year, like big pumpkins, and he gets a ton of them. And then I would grow like tulips and greens and things like that. I would try out different tomatoes. But this area has become so much more shrouded with evergreen growth and just canopies of trees. It's really changed into quite a nice shade garden. And then I'm just gonna walk through the back of this flower bed. There's a sensation lilac. So this is kind of a common one to find, but they're gorgeous. Dark purple, and every one of their blooms has a white margin. So it really gives it that kind of pop. Another lemony lace elderberry. These are lemon jade sedums that I gave to my parents a couple of years ago, and we love them. I love mine. In fact, I ordered more this year so I could put another drift in somewhere else in our garden. I don't know what variety of Japanese maple this is. I'm guessing it's either a Bloodgood or an Emperor one. Really pretty. Isn't that beautiful? It's just so, the layers are so gorgeous. And it looks so different when you're down here versus when you're on the balcony. When you're on the balcony, you can kind of see each individual plant, but you look down this way and you see all the layering. So Erin, if you stand like right here, you can see the green of the Perosia right here, backed by the blue spruce, backed by the yellow, it's a Katsura Japanese maple, the white of the lamium on the ground, and the pink or red of that royalty crabapple. All of those layers, all of those colors are just so beautiful. And it's amazing to think too how full our flower beds get. I mean, you guys know how it is. This time of year, things are just like they're starting to roll. But some of the later perennials are yet to really kind of emerge and kind of come into their own. Like this area fills up with mums. And there's, I think, bronze and kind of deep red mums down in this area in the fall. This is one of my favorite textures down here. This is a type of iris that I think it's just gorgeous. That super strict, upright form is beautiful. This is what is this? Is this a Katsura tree? I'm gonna have to ask my mom. I can't remember. It's really pretty and it's nice and thin. The Perosia though here, they grow very, very slowly, but they are probably one of the best ones for fall color ever. They're so beautiful. Kind of this iridescent neon kind of combination of colors with orange and red and purple and just beautiful. Paper bark maple right here. So kind of utilizing some really beautiful bark for winter interest. Of course, there's winter interest all over the place with the rock walls and the boxwoods. This area here, we came in and planted some heucherellas a while ago. There's a hedge of munchkin oak leaf hydrangeas. This area you can see had lamium in it, and I think they're just kind of like, oh, we got to get the lamium out of here because it does want to take over. It's not hard to remove, but they put in, I think, blue lobelia last year in here. It was beautiful, and there is Hakana cloet in here as well. And you can kind of see little bits of it coming up. This is kind of a newer hedge, so it looks like maybe one needs to be replaced right here, which is super typical. I need to do that in my hedge as well. I have a hedge by our gazebo. But there's a beautiful lavendery bluish clematis back there and patriot hostas that kind of line around the fountain there. More patriot hostas underneath this blue spruce. And this area too, it looks like they're kind of starting to peter a little bit, but this used to be thick with poppies, like salmon pink colored poppies, except for the occasional bright orange. It was like there was one bright orange poppy that would come up every year, and we always used to kind of laugh about it. It was a total eyesore when you have it in with salmon pink. And this area here, this is a wayfaring tree. I have got one in our yard, kind of by the big birch tree. And they're really beautiful right now. So they've got their blooms going on, and then they're followed by dark blueberries. And the leaves are amazing. It's a viburnum. And so we get another view. This is a gorgeous view from down here. Another view of Brunnera. There's Hakana cloa, so I'll point them all out here. This is Ibris, candy tuft, spring bloomer. And then we've got the Hakana cloa there. These are flower carpet roses in the color amber. So they're beautiful apricot, pink, yellowish kind of blend. The Brunnera, even when it's not in bloom, is gorgeous because the foliage is so beautiful. I mean, you can see right here how beautiful that is. It's awesome to get double duty out of plants. And then the ivy hedge. Now, a lot of people ask my parents, like, how do you keep your ivy in check? It just like wants to take over. It's so noxious. The only place, like right here, it's not a problem. It's planted up above and kind of spills down, and it kind of roots in if it can touch some soil in between rocks. But right here, it hasn't been a problem. Nothing like how it was by the house. We don't have as much of a rampant problem with it taking over here because we just don't have the conditions for it. Bleeding hearts tucked in. This is what I love about mature gardens. I love this. I love the full look here. I mean, you can have your tight structure, but I love to have the fluffy, beautiful, overflowing look. Kind of that juxtaposition I think is important to me anyway. I know we all have kind of our own style and opinions when it comes to that, but isn't this just gorgeous? There's still hellebores in bloom here. There's some darker colored ones and some pinkish ones here. And then our little angel, like little bird bath, ivy, brunnera, Japanese maple. You can see the tulip layer and then the layers beyond up there. So I think really the last area to kind of go around is maybe let's go this way. This is a row of spring snow crabapples, and they're just now, you can see, losing their blooms. And beyond that, so this is bishop's weed. Oh my word, it's been here forever. And bishop's weed, if you have an area that you want something to fill in, this is the plant for you. You can get it in green. You can also get it in a variegated. And this was always like the dreaded chore as kids to have to go out and cut back the bishop's weed because it's always so thick and it wants to spread everywhere. But they've kept it in check really well, and it is beautiful and lush looking. Right back behind that on the first level of the rock wall, those are Annabelle hydrangeas, and they actually do pretty well given the fact that this area is pretty much shade all the time. They always have big white blooms on them all summer long. And then beyond that, the upper level is ivory halo dogwoods. So they provide a nice red branch color in the wintertime. And then down through here, now there's going to be some interesting changes down here because these junipers, they're called Spartan junipers. They're only supposed to grow 5 to 6 feet wide, and they've clearly outgrown that. They must really love it. But look what they're doing. They're growing so big that they're starting to push the rock wall down. So there are Concord barberries up top. I think those are Concords anyway. And then down in the next layer, there's lavender, which they're gonna, I think, take all the lavender out and replace it with fresh, but I think they're gonna have to replace these or figure something different out, which is so sad to me because I'll show you the view from up top. They're gorgeous. They back the swimming pool. And you know, stuff like this, it just happens. Like sometimes you'll get a plant that just does not behave the way it's supposed to or stay within the size it's supposed to, and you just have to address those things as they come along. And this area down here has been a kind of a sick bay for the nursery, like the blue spruces, both of these, and this one here were all sick plants down at the garden center. Like they came in broken, like had broken leaders, or they were kind of like had blight or some kind of weird thing going on with them. And so my parents will just bring stuff like that here and just pop it down below the pool is what they call it. And it's just kind of this area where things can just try. And oftentimes they become spectacular plants if you give them enough time. We've got a pear here and an alder, which I love. So look at this, the alder alders are great for really wet areas, which this is right here. And they create these beautiful cones that we like to use to make wreaths, and we work them into holiday projects mostly. But they're just the sweetest little cones. And they're all over, like I could just get buckets full of them right now. It's a good time. There are more flower carpet roses here that are coral colored. And then up above, I think we're gonna come and maybe pull a couple big weeds. I think we're gonna come plant some caladiums in here this year. I think that this spot right here is like the perfect area because they will get some sun, but they're mostly protected. And right above there, that's the pool deck and the pool up there. So I think that'll be a really pretty, low maintenance, no mess sort of plant to try out in this space. And then beyond here, there's the pasture, of course. The oak tree is just starting to leaf out. Is this Simus Safuga? Is that how you say it? Look at this. The color of the leaves and the style of the blooms. I really want some of this in my cut flower garden. And then the swimming pool, which, you know, can't say a lot about it right now because it's not open. The guys were supposed to come out and open it today, but I think the weather probably held people back. And then it kind of just shoots you right back out. Oh, look at the lilac. See, when we were under it, you can't see how beautiful it is. Those blooms are just so pretty. So it just kind of shoots you right back out to the parking area, which we planted with tulips earlier on. There's some Purissima blonde tulips in there and some really beautiful pink, it's a pink mix pansy. One last thing I want to show you before we are done are the pots. Just because we showed you them last year, and I just want to show you what they put in after we were done. So if you take a look at all the pots, you might remember last year we did purple fountain grass and Supertunia Vista snowdrift. They were gorgeous. And so after they were done last fall, they put in these blue spruce lollipops, and those were in here for the whole, of course, the whole winter. And they stuck evergreens down in here to make them look really Christmassy, and then they followed up with more pansies this spring. And I think that that is it, you guys. I mean, we could spend hours and hours and hours going through every bed and showing you all the layers and talking about all the plants, but that just gives you kind of broad look at what their garden is like, and kind of a place where I learned a lot about gardening. And it's one of the only places on this earth where I can actually nap. Like this, there's something about this house that makes me feel super relaxed, and it's just a haven. So I feel super blessed to have been able to grow up here and still learn from the stuff that's in here and spend a lot of time out here with my family. So anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today and walking through my parents' garden with me, and we will see you in the next video. Bye. Killdeer is trying to lure us away. She'll act like she has a broken wing. Look at, I think her nest is right over here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Oh, there's 3 eggs now. Look. So Killdeer, you guys, I don't know if you have those type of birds in your area, but they lay nests right in the middle of gravel driveways or right off the side of the road. And then the mama, she'll take off and she acts like she has a broken wing, and she tries to lure you away from her nest. That's what they do. They're strange little birds, but they are fun to watch. And when the little birds hatch, they're pretty much up and running the same day. They're a pretty neat bird.